Hi, could we get you to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Jeff Wayne. I'm a composer and producer.
War of the Worlds is probably one of my most favorite pieces of music and shows going. And when you were last in Liverpool, I was blown away by your show. And we can't wait to see you back. Have you got anything unusual or anything special for this new production?
Well, firstly, I'm very privileged that you liked it so much. And the show, I've been touring with Arena Productions since 2006. And I think it was on the second or third tour that Liverpool became a venue with a fantastic arena overlooking the water. And it's one of my favorite arenas to perform in. And ever since we've been touring, I keep growing it. I never just sort of take it out of the box and do it the same way twice. It would get rather boring, and as well as the fact that I think technology changes so much. The artists that play the main roles, they have always something to add, in their own way. And this tour is going to be no different. We have some new ingredients that are, I think, going to be pretty exciting. And from my point of view as a musician, my greatest sort of feeling about it is I'm on stage conducting on a podium, sort of world-class musicians and performers, and the technology just keeps expanding every time we go out. So some of our new tricks are going to reflect that.
Are you bringing back the holograms that you had on stage last time?
If you're meaning Liam Neeson, yes, absolutely. Liam returns. He plays the role of a journalist who has survived this Martian invasion some 6 years earlier. So he's telling the story in 1904 and writing it down for his newspaper. And yes, Liam is back. He's in full body, and he does things that we couldn't do with the first 4 or 5 tours when Richard Burton was our journalist, because he had passed away many years earlier. Whereas with Liam, we were able to film him in New York for 5 or 6 days. He was great to work with. Everything that one knows about him as an artist, I found absolutely true, other than he couldn't say the word Martian very easily. So we had to keep doing take after take. And when I finally got to the point, I said, Liam, you're struggling a bit on the word Martian. And he said, well, what am I saying? I said, you're saying Martian. And he said, well, what did you expect? I'm Irish. And I had no idea what he meant by that, but that was his answer. We have it as an outtake, and then he got it.
I think Simon's got a couple of questions as well.
Fire away.
Thank you, Jeff. One of my questions I would like to ask is, how it's such an iconic book to have made a musical out of. What inspired you? Why did you pick The War of the Worlds?
Sorry, that was my phone that just went off.
Oh, don't worry.
It was a period when I was doing a lot of media music, films, TV work, a lot of advertising music, and I was also producing a few artists. That one in particular, I was having a great run with a mate who to this day remains a very close friend, David Essex. And my dad kept reminding me that while I was having great fun on the road with David and all the other work that I had sort of broken through in the field of music, he said, you always said you wanted to find a story that you fall in love with and just start with like a blank canvas. And he was right. So we started reading books of all different genres, not just science fiction. And he kept feeding me these books. And it was the night before this tour that I was going out with David. And he came over to my house just to wish me luck and said, here's another book. And it was H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds. And bear in mind, in that period of time, we had no internet, nothing of the sort that we're so used to today. So reading was quite commonplace when you were out on the road for long periods of time. And after all the books that I had read and thought, yeah, some of these are great stories, but I didn't feel it. There was some reason that I didn't sort of attach myself to them. But this one read and I was hooked. And sort of looking back, I realized that it contained a couple of key ingredients that just hit me, you know, in the heart to start with. And that was, here was a man, H.G. Wells, who could see an alien invasion that landed in Surrey in England and then goes all over the country. And he was really taking a pop at the expanding British Empire. So his Martians were invaders, and they could be invaders from any time, any place, but they represented a force of supreme intelligence, amazing weaponry and machinery. But the underlying themes, which balanced out this incredible sort of vision, was human feelings, hope, faith, love. So when you put them all together, it really just struck me, Simon, in the way that eventually my dad and I, who was my partner with me, we wound up about 3 months later meeting with Frank Wells, who was H.G.'s son. He also had a brother named Frank, by the way, who gave him the idea for the story in the first place. But we met with Frank, with his agents, and he wanted to know, or asked, did I have any ideas as to how I wanted to interpret this story of his dad's into a musical work. And what I knew I wanted to do was not do what other filmmakers and other producers who were interpreting the War of the Worlds over the years, some of them in a really original way, but they seem to always wind up in contemporary America for some reason, and use just the seed of the idea of an invasion from another planet. What I fell in love with was a dark Victorian tale with those sort of ingredients that I just mentioned. And even though I'm a Yank by birth, I've lived here over 2/3 of my life, and I just fell in love with this story. And it was one of the two reasons that Frank said, okay, I'm going to sell you the rights. The other reason was because here he was meeting a father and son team who were partnering on this project, or would be partnering on the project. And pretty much right then and there, we acquired the rights from him.
With COVID at the moment being so massive, how do you think it ties in with the idea of the aliens being affected by the viruses to what we're seeing today in modern society?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's H.G. Wells again, who twisted his story at the very end to do the Martians in, because here they were, this incredible force of brain, of power through their weaponry and machinery. And the one thing they didn't think about was the human cold, bacteria that causes it. And here we are in 2021, and we've just living through with great loss, but we're hopefully emerging to start life again in a more normal way. And he was writing about this in 1897 when he first wrote the story. I had written a minor theme, not one of the major things, but a minor one, which just for that moment in the story was about the Martians perishing, more of a death wail coming from them. And I, on my scores, because in those days everything was handwritten scores rather than say computers and software, which is commonplace now. And I just gave it a name, this little mini theme called Life Begins Again, because it just reflected what was going to happen after the Martians do perish. Life begins again. And many years later, I extended it into becoming a full song, which now has been in our arena tours and a West End run we did since 2014. And it's got two major sequences where that song is performed. And the song is called Life Begins Again. And now here we are in 2021. And I guess like all, artists and bands, they give a name to their tours, and that's what I've done through the years. The only name I even thought about was Life Begins Again. It's just the right time to call it a tour of that name.
I was just going to ask you, Jeff, the musical, is it good for all ages, from children to adults? Is it a family musical?
Yeah, it's a good question, Simon. And the answer is yes. I never knew, like anybody who's fortunate to enjoy a record being successful, that unless you tour, you don't really know who's buying your record. And when we started touring in 2006, it became very apparent that it was, although probably at that beginning point, predominantly more people from, I guess, their 30s on up. There were also younger children up to a point who were attending with their parents or grandparents. Now it's pretty much across the board. You come to see any of our shows, I think you'd find a real mixture. I think it's just the fact that younger people seem to have heard about, if they have, the extraordinary technology that we use in the show. Yeah, and there's some music in it. They haven't heard the albums or the singles that have been hits, but those that are taking them, they know the music, and together they seem to discover that there's two elements to our arena tours. And so it has expanded definitely over the years, and I'm hoping that'll be the same when we go out on the road next year.
What changed the way you've actually done the music from the start to now? Anything changed with the musical instruments you use and stuff like that, and how you adapted it to work on stage from being a item that went out on disc? Well, sorry, record.
No, you're right. It was still the era of the vinyl disc when it was first released. Firstly, I'm somebody who is still very much part of the world, and I listen to all sorts of music that just as a fan. I have 4 children. One of them is a son who's been a very successful DJ and producer. And he just this week entered the top of the electronica charts in many countries with his debut album. He hired me to write some of the string arrangements, but I'm always hearing him work. So he has a very modern slant on production techniques. And he does a lot of in fact, all of our play out music. So between us and the studio and the people that I've always worked with, I'm very keen on keeping my eyes and particularly my ears open. And so the show has had subtle changes. I'll change the groove, something that reflects where we are today. If you listen to the original double album and then compare it with where we are, you'd hear it. I don't think I've changed the heart and soul of the complete piece, because I wouldn't ever want to do that. But it's challenging to go out and know that you can subtly add things. The show itself has grown immensely. It was already a big show when we started, but hello.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, you were saying, I do apologize for that.
It's all right, that's 1-1 because my phone went off at the beginning of our the show itself, because of technology, it's changed. So if you were to compare our 6-truck tour when we started, it was already big. Now we're up to 12 trucks, and it's probably going to grow to another one by the time we get out on the road next year. But that's the result of, as I said, I don't ever want to take the show out and do it the same way again. So the challenges are there. It's only what your pocketbook can afford to keep adding things. And I'm always held back by our production manager and those around me, because they say I'm bonkers. I want to do too many things. But that's the fun part, is challenging.
Forever Autumn is probably one of the most amazing pieces that you've actually got on your album, in my view. What is the most favorite piece of music you have personally?
All right, from the War of the Worlds, I think from a composer's point of view, as a challenge, It's a piece that appears in two places called The Red Weed. And it's a vegetation of death that H.G. Wells wrote about. The Martians arrive with like a container of seeds and they plant them the second they arrive. And as they spread the story around the country, they keep planting them and they turn into this most beautiful vegetation like look. And it is beautiful, but anything and anyone that gets in its way gets smothered, choked to death. So it's beautiful, but it's also deadly. As a composer, I asked myself, what would I want to do to interpret that? And I thought trying to compose a piece of music in two separate keys to create a mood of the potential danger of this red weed, and the other is the beauty of it because it is beautiful to look at. So writing in two keys was something I had never done before. I haven't done it since, in fact. But it was a challenge because what I thought it's going to sound like, you know, when you put your fingers down a blackboard and you hear this screech or a cat being choked. That's what I thought I was facing if I got it wrong. But it worked out, and it's something that I'm really proud of as a composer.
So Jeff, how many dates 2022 are you looking to? How many arenas will you be doing in 2022?
You're asking me a good question, Simon. I don't think I have a particularly good answer for you. I think we're up to about 16 or 17 shows all around Great Britain. We've played Europe and as far away as Australia and New Zealand over the years, and we're probably going to do the same next year. That's about the size that we play in Great Britain. We're playing, in fact, for the first time, because it's a new arena, Hull, which coincidentally, the lady that wrote the script for and adapted the H.G. Wells novel was my stepmother. She was married to my dad, and she was born in Hull, raised in Manchester, and then came down to London and became a journalist and a writer in her own right. And she was the perfect writer. She had the soul of exactly the type of writer that was needed. Doreen was her first name. And I'm thrilled, actually, to be playing in a city there where she was born. She won't know that. She passed away, sadly, from breast cancer some years ago, but for many years kept up with her family who had moved mostly to Manchester. A couple moved to London, but it feels a bit of an umbrage to be playing there, even though she won't know it.
Yeah. Very emotional day.
I think.
Yeah, pretty beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
It's a funny thing that there's a character known as Parson Nathaniel on the War of the Worlds, and he is a man of the cloth, the person you'd go to for moral and spiritual comfort in times of need. Yet when the Martians land, he's the first one that goes totally bonkers. He loses it. He doesn't believe in faith, love, hope. And in the War of the Worlds, it's a very long sequence of one of the scenes that he's in, a duet that he is the opposite to his wife. And they have this battle about belief and faith and love. But my original Parson Nathaniel on the original double album was Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy, who I was thrilled to work with. I had no expectancy that he'd be interested, but he was. And he came down to the studio that I was recording the War of the Worlds in, and we got on great. He did a fantastic job. What a voice, what a passion. And I spoke with him no more than about 2 or 3 weeks before he passed. And he was in hospital at the point that we spoke. He still had a sense of humor. I think he knew he was going to pass, but every time we've played Dublin, there's a pub that has a statue that's honoring him. And I always go there, get a pint and raise a toast to him, give him a little nod, and then we play our show.
In Liverpool, in Liverpool, when you come to Liverpool, is there any venue which you really want to go to?
You mean other than where we're playing?
Other than where you're playing, yeah.
Well, when we've had time, there's a couple of clubs in and around where the cavern was, and there, or my main sport is tennis. So along the way, every time I tour, I tend to get to know some of the players or coaches that are at local centers teaching, coaching, and those are the things I tend to do. Party a bit if we have time. The show is like a bit of a party anyway, because everybody seems to always get on well, and that's good enough for me.
Are you coming to the International Tennis Championships then in Liverpool?
No, I'm not even sure about with whatever we're allowed to. I know Wimbledon has said at the moment they're only going to allow about 25% of capacity. So I don't know what that tournament is. I'm aware of it. I mean, I follow all the results. I know so many of the players that are on the circuit or have been on the circuit. Our county, which is my county, Hertfordshire, which I captain, some of our players have played Wimbledon and those and other tournaments. So it's a world I'm familiar with.
Tennis is close to my heart. My nephew, he plays. He's a county champion.
Is he?
14. I used to play tennis.
Did you? What?
But I thought I was good. Only county game, only local club. But my nephew, I played him last month. He's only 13, and I won one game out of 2 sets. I got beat 6-1.
Oh.
But it's my favorite player of all time. I used to like. I've always loved John McEnroe. He was my. I just loved his brashness, the way he was a bit of a rebel.
Yeah, he was. There's no doubt about it. I was asked to produce a record of a band that he was in with other tennis players, Pat Cash, McEnroe, a couple of others, and it was a cover version of it was a Led Zeppelin track, and Stairway to Heaven, I think it was. And I was in California. I was working when I got the call from the label that they had signed to do this one-off single, and it was a lead up to Wimbledon. So they were all in it, and they wanted to promote the single, and they did do the record. And I was sort of eating my arm off with frustration that there I was working in California, and him and a couple of others that their tennis was superb, and McEnroe is a character you couldn't love to hate, but but what a player.
Yeah, he was like Marmite.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like Marmite.
I played a.
But tennis has a lot of characters. That's what I love. Tennis has so many. Like, there's a lot of characters in tennis. It's such an amazing sport to watch. Yeah. I love it.
I agree with you, Simon. I mean, it's a very individual sport, and then it comes together in a tournament. Everybody looks so matey and all that, but yeah, it's a very competitive sport in body and mind. It's a game of chess on a big board, I think.
Chess. Yeah.
Just may I ask, what county does your cousin?
He's with what do you call it? He's in a tennis club in Southport.
Merseyside.
Merseyside. He plays in the Bolton National Tennis Centre. He's he's a really good player. Patrick knows. Sam used to teach him. But yeah, he's a great. He could play with his left and right hand when he was younger. When he was a child, he could play with both hands. So
that's special.
Yeah, he's the one thing. One of my clients, he was a professional tennis player. He played at Wimbledon, and he toured. And I knew Gabriel had a talent, so I asked him, how do you know if someone's going to make it? And he said, what you need to do is put him into a camp in Spain and see if he can cope with being away from home, because it's not only the talent, it's whether you can cope with, like Clive used to travel up and down in his Escort, you know, doing the circuit, you know, it's a lot of it on your mind, the stress, and you know, unless you make it to the top, you know, money's tight. He used to, as I say, he used to travel in his Ford Escort up and down the country, but he played Wimbledon. So how many people can say they played Wimbledon? You know,
well, you're absolutely right, and it is absolutely true that there was a survey done by the ITF, which is the International Tennis Federation, about where a tennis player starts to just break even with overheads.
Yeah.
You know, coaching, travel, gear, you name it,
name it.
physios, etc. And it was something at that point around the top 100. And when you consider how many tennis players there are trying to make a living, if you know, so I've just got to sign this. Is this meeting has been upgraded by the host and now includes unlimited minutes. So we must be doing pretty good, guys. If
I didn't actually see that, so that's well, apologies for that.
No.
But moving on very quickly, because we are
we were talking about tennis. I thought that was what the interview was about.
Sorry about that, Jeff. Apologies, but it's one of my passions.
Wearing my captain's hat for Hertfordshire, if your cousin, sorry, was it your cousin or a friend, the 13?
My nephew.
Beg your pardon, nephew. If he wants to play for a great county, I'm always looking out for players for Hertfordshire.
Oh wow, thank you, Jeff. I'll tell.
Right.
Thank you, Jeff.
I guess we're back to music or something like that.
Actually, it's a very good it's a very good example of how media at the moment is going all over the place. You can't do proper interviews and things all that easily online because everything in month Sundays tends to go wrong and always does, particularly when you're working from home. Have you actually had anything that has gone completely utterly mad as you're trying to sort out this event, this arena tour?
We give ourselves up to about 15 months. So whether it's studio work, we're going through the music, maybe new gear, software. So by the time we're in rehearsal, we've pretty much sorted out anything that can go wrong. But having said, and then we have a production team that have on a giant scale the same sort of issues. So, you know, we have this 30-foot, 3-ton Martian fighting machine that spews heat rays, real flames out and over the audience. So there's a lot of testing, health and safety issues, but things do go wrong in performance. That it's so technology driven to keep everything working, even though it's as loose as live performance can be. The technology is what can go wrong more times than not. And if I have a minute just to tell you one story that will never leave my memory. It's on our first tour. We were in Glasgow. It was before we started playing the arenas. We played, it was about a 4,000 seater, but it was more like, I think it was called the Armadillo. And we were playing our first of 2 shows there. And somewhere at the start of the second half, and it happens to be this piece called The Red Weed, which has virtually no tempo to it. It's very moody. So from a conducting point of view, I'm expressing myself and everybody's following, of course, to play and to perform. And suddenly sound goes dead. And I have always had, I think it's pretty common with probably all shows. In my case, as the conductor, I have a little button that's assigned to the stage manager to basically say, help, what do we do next? Or turn the lights on, we're stopping the show if it's that bad. But whatever came to my mind reduced itself to looking over at our drummer, and I sort of cued him, just keep the beat going. And this piece didn't really have much of a beat, didn't have a drum part in it, but he knew what I was saying was just make believe you're a click track. And he did. and everybody's looking around me, and it's a symphonic string orchestra, 48 musicians, a 10-piece band at that point. So, and obviously with technology and all the other things, all interconnected, it was like all hands were on their instruments playing, but looking desperately at me because I'm the guy that's going like this, you know, and trying to keep everybody together. And that's what we did. I kept conducting. I followed the beat from our drummer, and something like 10, 12 minutes later, suddenly, boom, the sound comes straight back, and we were perfectly in the right place. We hadn't dropped a beat. It turned out it was a router, I think it's called, a long cable from front of house up to the stage and back again that somehow had split. And somebody from the crew had been crawling underneath the stage out to the audience, eventually found it, put it back together, and we were off and running again. But it was a high five moment when everybody finished the show, because we couldn't believe there we were in perfect sync with the animation, with the fighting machine, everything, absolutely perfect.
How much do you direct? Do you direct the lighting as well and the pyrotechnics and everything, or are you just concentrating on the music?
No, it's the music and the production of the show, but every show of a scale in and around what we do, there are experts who, you know, govern their domain. So when you say about lighting or sound, we have quite a big team. They will have learned about the War of the Worlds, have what's called a storyboard, and they're given as an electronic version of essentially almost like a frame by frame breakdown of everything that's going on in that given moment with timings. And we talk about the ingredients. We have a stage director who directs the artists who are performing. It's a big company. It's about 120 people that make up the War of the Worlds.
So it's very much like a proper film crew. Everybody has to be hands on deck.
For sure, yeah. And it's there's a boat at the end of the first half with a song called Thunderchild, which sinks at the hands of the Martians. But I always say when we're all working together, we don't want to go down like the Thunderchild. We want to be high-fiving at the end of every show. So stay with it, guys.
Now, you haven't confirmed the cast yet. Have you got anybody that you're thinking of at the moment?
We do have now 2 of the 6 leading characters. The other 4 are soon to be announced, but we're on the last 2 before we make the announcement. The person that's going to play Parson Nathaniel, who's the person that I mentioned to, the character I mentioned to you earlier that was first played by Phil Lynott, that's Kevin Clifton, who's probably most known from Strictly Come Dancing, but for many people, they won't know that he's been in 3 big musicals, 1 in the West End, 2 around Great Britain on a tour. He's going into 1 at the in London around, I think it's July, but he sings, he acts, he's a real all-rounder, and he's been into my studio here where we are twice now to record and test it all out, as we do with every potential guest artist. So he's the first one, and he's going to play the artilleryman. I beg your pardon, I got the character wrong. He's going to play the artilleryman. The parson is soon to be announced. The other person who signed is Claire Richards, who's most known from Steps. She is playing the parson's wife. That's correct. And she's got a beautiful voice. I hadn't known her work outside of Steps, but she has quite a range and has done quite a variety of work. So she's signed, and again, she's been in the studio. We've gone through it all, and I think we'll be very excited when we announce the other 4 in the very near future.
Is that the hard part, trying to find people with vocal range, because your music covers so many different genres, so many different styles?
Yeah, it is a very big challenge, because it's also the one thing we have no control over. Because anybody who's worked with me on the War of the Worlds knows that the casting to me is always about the H.G. Wells story. You're meeting people along the way. They're not, unless they happen to be married, like 2 of the characters are. You're just meeting characters along the way. So it is always meant to be a diverse range of characters in the way the story unfolds. Some of the songs, particularly, are quite big in power or range because of maybe more of a rock element or a melodic element, and the range hits into the opera territory at the top end. So it's a challenge. And we never know when we're going to be fully cast. As I'm saying, we're still on the last two, but we're getting closer. And when it happens, it's a big relief because everything else is going great at the moment.
Now, if anybody wants to see the show, they can go to livenation.co.uk, and I've got a list of all the performances venues that you're performing at. Is there any venue which you are most looking forward to? And you can say Liverpool.
Liverpool.
That's a good one.
It is one of my favorite venues, in truth, but for different reasons, I really do enjoy them all. I think the one that has given me the loudest feedback, or there's a few, but Manchester, Glasgow, Newcastle, it seems that Liverpool, the northern cities, they tell you how they feel. The closer you get to London, you get, I guess, the more, I don't mean to say sophisticated in a positive way, but more of, okay, prove to us you're good. And you get that's nice. Although we actually get a bit more at the O2. But yeah, no, I love it when we're aware there's an audience out there. And fortunately, we've had great receptions over the years.
Well, thank you for your time. It's been greatly appreciated. It's been fascinating talking to you. And sorry about this slight divert off subject there at times. And if anybody wants to actually do it, just a reminder, it's livenation.co.uk. And if anybody wants to find out more about you, have you got a Twitter or Facebook or website people could find out more about yourself?
Yeah, I think if one just keyed my name in the War of the Worlds in, it would take you to the appropriate places. Live Nation is our promoter, so there's always an easy way to find us.
Well, thank you and good luck with the show.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Simon,
you,
all the best.
Thank
And to your nephew.
Jeff, before you go, who's going to win Wimbledon?
Oh gosh, good question. Do you know?
I don't. I'm thinking Djokovic, if he's.
It's a good bet. My favorite.
Just
my favorite player since he was 16 is Rafa. So I'm always rooting for him until he's out of a tournament, but he doesn't get out of tournaments too often. He's just got a style, a personality, a humbleness that I just adore.
Yeah.